The study asks, what are the characteristics of the highest impact schools? These are schools in which students perform far above similar students across the state. What barriers exist to improving student achievement in the lowest impact schools? These are the schools in which students perform far below similar students across the state. And how might existing policies and programs address those barriers? The study finds that the highest impact schools exhibit best practices that are well established in education research and for which guidance and support are available through the Kentucky Department of Education and through other sources. In other words, the study found no surprises in this area. Challenges to implementing these best practices in lowest impact schools were related to leadership and staffing and percentages of new teachers. In its recommendations, the report notes greater potential for monitoring and support of schools for which data indicates challenges. But some of the challenges noted in the report will be difficult to address through local action alone. Staff group schools into 5 impact performance categories ranging from highest to lowest. This study focuses primarily on what can be learned from the highest group to assist schools in the lowest group. Highest impact schools are those in which student performance on state tests far exceeded similar students across the state. Lowest impact schools are those with student performance that is far below similar students across the state. Both the highest and lowest impact categories contain a full range of schools from the lowest to highest poverty. But I did want to emphasize on the data slide that we did visit 14 schools across the Commonwealth as part of our data collection. First, the difference between highest and lowest impact schools was not explained by how much they spent. Overall, OEA found little difference in per pupil spending between highest and lowest impact schools. There were some small differences, however, on how the funds were spent, with highest impact schools spending proportionally more on expenses related directly to classroom instruction. These higher expenditures are explained largely by the fact that higher impact schools generally have more experienced teachers, and as you'll see on the next slide, lower staff turnover, and at the middle and high school levels, more instructional staff per students. Highest impact schools on average spent slightly less than lowest impact schools on instructional support and school administration. This slide shows the teacher turnover percentages and the average principal tenure for all highest and lowest impact schools. It shows that the highest impact schools have less teacher turnover and more experienced principals relative to the lowest impact schools. Related to turnover, data included at the end of your slide packet show higher percentages of newer teachers in lowest impact schools. We know from previous reports that these newer teachers are increasingly entering teaching through alternative certification routes and may have little or no classroom experience when they begin. Principals in highest impact schools stay an average of 6 years, which is 1.5 times greater than the average of 4 years in lowest impact schools. The constant churn of teachers and principals in many lowest impact schools presents a barrier to establishing the systems necessary for student academic success. Some factors affecting teacher turnover are outside of a school's control. These include the proximity of schools with much more competitive salaries, higher performing student populations, and affordable housing. Administrators in 3 lowest impact schools noted the lack of affordable housing available in their counties. 1 had recently experienced a natural disaster, and 2 were located in rural counties in which most of the properties for sale were expensive family farms.
Highest impact site visit schools exhibited all of the characteristics of instructional systems shown on this slide. These systems aligned curriculum and assessment, data analysis and remediation, and instructional monitoring and support. The elements of these systems are supported by decades of education research, and most are outlined in a variety of KDE documents. Under strong leadership, instructional systems reduce isolation, increase consistency, and promote a sense of common accountability for student success. This alludes to the teacher leadership teams we found in all highest impact schools. Teacher leaders, whether formal or informal, played critical roles in their own content areas. Together with principals and other school administrators, they helped to clarify instructional expectations, monitor learning and student work, and mentor new teachers. The instructional systems relied ultimately, however, on principals to ensure that standards for classroom instruction were set and to require action from teachers who are not meeting those standards. OEA was surprised to find that these systems had recently been incomplete or non-existent in most lowest impact schools we visited. Even with some system elements in place, however, OEA observed inconsistent accountability for classroom instruction in most lowest impact schools. Principals in these schools expressed resignation about teachers in the school who were unwilling to change practices. In some cases, principals may have lacked the skill or confidence to have difficult conversations and address performance issues. In other cases, principals may lack the will. OEA heard several anecdotes of administrators who did not address performance issues due to personal relationships. Finally, struggling teachers in lowest impact schools often lack support in their subject areas. Some schools lacked the experienced teacher or instructional leaders, and others appeared overwhelmed by the high number of new teachers needing support. And as Chris said, many of our new teachers are entering through alternative routes and may have little or no classroom experience when they enter the classroom. The report suggests that effective behavioral systems are a critical building block of school culture and that instructional reforms may be unsuccessful in their absence. Statewide, highest and lowest impact schools differed more on indicators of climate, culture, and behavior than on any other indicator of school practice available for this study. Questions that distinguish the highest and lowest impact schools the most address supportive interactions among students, how often student misconduct disrupts learning, and student enthusiasm about being at school. Even in the highest impact schools, only 50% of teachers responded favorably to the question about student misconduct, which suggests that this is a challenge at least some of the time, even in the highest impact schools. Similarly, these questions address students helping each other, respectful relationships between teachers and students, and effectiveness of school leaders at developing rules. Principals and teachers in all highest impact schools stress the school's strong emphasis on building positive relationships among students and teachers. They also noted heavy investments in time and resources to establish and reinforce behavior expectations. Highest impact schools, principals really address these challenges. This sometimes required the principals to be willing to face conflicts with parents, district administrators, and even the local school board. In contrast, teachers in most lowest impact schools noted that a small percentage of students can destabilize a school or classroom, that there is often little or no consequence for serious disruptive behavior of some students. And in one school, teachers reported low morale, teacher absences, and substitutes refusing to work in the building. As illustrated in the previous slides, strong leadership is necessary to implement effective instructional and behavioral systems. Effective leadership is also critical for teacher recruitment and retention. The highest impact site visit schools were desired destinations for job seekers, and teachers in many of these schools reported reluctance ever to leave the school, even for a higher salary. The report concludes that best practices are well established, but implementation can be challenging and take many years of sustained attention and stable staffing. Local leaders appear unaware of urgent issues that exist in their schools, struggle from leadership challenges, poor climate, culture, or student behavior, and teacher or principal turnover. The report notes that unfavorable working conditions are a potential red flag for school conditions that undermine instruction and achievement. As I said, some local leaders appear unaware of the urgent need indicated by some of the data. Teacher working conditions are not typically included in school or district planning documents, and currently KDE does not take an active role in supporting data use. Finally, the report touches on issues associated with CSI schools, which are the lowest 5% of schools by level. The report notes that challenges related to teacher working conditions and turnover are greater in CSI schools than in the lowest impact schools overall. These issues are not typically addressed. And if they're not addressed, the other improvement efforts might not be sustainable.